Hi, friends. Just a quick note before we jump into this week's episode. InStride is brought to you by Ride IQ. Ride IQ is a first of its kind equestrian coaching platform that will transform your independent schooling rides. Ride IQ members get access to the private mobile app with hundreds of on demand listen while you ride audio lessons taught by top eventing, jumper, and dressage coaches. And since you like podcasts, the Ride IQ app also includes over 100 exclusive podcast episodes to keep you company during your hacks, your commute, your barn chores, or whatever it is you do while you listen. Membership is only $29.99 per month, and every membership automatically includes a 2-week unlimited access free trial. Get started by downloading the Ride IQ mobile app on iPhone or Android. On today's episode of InStride, Sinead talks to Sharon White. Sharon is an international 5-star event rider and trainer based at Last Frontier Farm in Summit Point, West Virginia. Over the years, Sharon has worked with several top equestrians, including Bruce Davidson, Torrance Watkins, Linda Zhang, Jimmy Wofford, and others. Known for her signature orange and white cross-country colors, Sharon has had an impressive career, including representing the U.S. in FEI Eventing Nations Cup competitions and being named as a reserve rider for the 2018 FEI World Equestrian Games. In addition to traveling internationally to compete at the top levels of the sport, Sharon has competed over 10 times at the Kentucky 3-day event, including a top 10 finish in 2018 with her current partner, Cooley on Show. Sharon is a USEA ICP Level 4 Certified Instructor and a highly sought-after coach and clinician. Sinead and Sharon are talking about mindfulness and utilizing breath work. We hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, everyone. We have Sharon White with us, who keeps gravitating towards the ceiling with her phone.
Phone wants things. I'm like, I don't actually know how to do it.
They are very unruly.
It's
It's okay. We started a podcast a couple weeks ago with Tammy Smith, and she was just holding it. And about 10 minutes in, the thing starts shaking because she didn't, I think, realize we were going to be on the phone so long. So the phone, we need some podcast stands or something to send out. Well, we're so happy to have you on. I'm so pleased that you found the time. I know there's never time to be had, so I really appreciate it.
Oh, Sinead, thank you so much for wanting to talk to me. I'm happy, so happy to get to talk with you about the things.
It's like the running joke we have that like the only time I can get to like talk to my friends and chat with people is on this podcast. I'm like, I haven't spoken to this person in forever, so will you get on this live call with me so we can catch up?
Perfect.
So first of all, where are you? You're at your house in West Virginia?
West Virginia. So at my farm, Last Frontier Farm in West Virginia right now.
And I was looking at that, and I think I've just always associated you with Last Frontier Farm, but I never actually thought about that name. Can you explain why the farm is named that?
Absolutely. So it's called Last Frontier Farm because I grew up in Alaska, and Alaska is the last frontier. So my parents, when we bought it, we named it Last Frontier Farm because I think my dad would really have preferred to be in Alaska. Here goes my phone again. And he ended up in a landlocked state because his two favorite says. But Alaska was really, that's where I grew up. My parents absolutely loved it. So this is that was in homage to our favorite state.
When did you move from Alaska here?
Probably when I was about 12.
Okay. Right. And your parents, everybody, you all moved to this farm. So you've pretty much been there since you were a teenager.
Well, no, we didn't move to this farm. No, this farm we about 20 years. Dad was in the Coast Guard. So he got transferred from Alaska to the East Coast. So he worked in Coast Guard headquarters in DC, outside of DC. So, and I started riding with my mom. When we moved back, we were looking for, as you do for your kids, you look for things for them to do. And my mom one day was like, I want to go horseback ride. And she opened up the Yellow Pages and found a local riding school, and we went out, and that's when I started riding horses. And she had Yeah, my mom had always wanted a horse growing up and could never afford to have one, and always loved them. So um, that's how we started.
That's so cool. I didn't realize that. And your mom had not ridden before, and you guys just started riding together.
No, she had ridden before. She had ridden a little bit growing up. And again, had always wanted a horse but couldn't afford one, and actually tried out for her college riding team and didn't make it because that's what, if you don't actually ride, you're not gonna make their college team. But she always loved it. So when we started, she was absolutely, way better than I was. So it was her passion, and I had never actually even thought about a horse. And
really?
Yeah, never crossed my mind really. And that first experience, that first smell, right?
Yeah. It either makes you leave or it draws you in forever.
Yeah. Okay, and there's something about this I really like.
Leather and manure. It's just like a really, it's a nice cologne.
It is a wonderful cologne.
Yeah. So where was that? Was that in
Virginia? In Virginia, so Great Falls Horse Center. And it was just a local riding school, and they happened to do eventing. They had an unrecognized event there.
Yeah.
So that's how I started eventing, because I didn't know there was anything else. We didn't just didn't. So that's where I landed and how I into the sport.
Oh, that's so cool. Now, and your dad in the Coast Guard, I didn't know that either. Already 5 minutes in, I'm learning all sorts of things. And what did he do in the Coast Guard? You said he was in headquarters? Like, what was that?
Well, he started out, he was always, he was a captain of an ice cutter in Alaska. So he was always on a ship. He loves the ocean. Right?
Oh my God.
But then they wanted him in headquarters. So that was, he would much prefer to have been on a ship, but they needed him. So.
Right. Wow. That's wild. Lynn Smansky's brother, I'm sure is in the Coast
I know. Yeah, I know.
And I'm always like, you do what? You fly helicopters for the it just seems bananas, the training they have to go through and all that. It's wild. Much respect. So kind of an adrenaline gene in the family or something there.
I taught her brother in Pony Club.
Oh, God, I bet you did, because you guys would have all been in the same area.
Yep. So funny. I remember at one Pony Club camp with him, we had to play games, mounted games, and I was so competitive. It was him and I doing barrels or something ridiculous. And he was so little, and I was like, I think he beat me anyway. It was so funny.
I believe it, because I hadn't spent any time with him until Lynn's wedding, and then he got this minute he showed up. We gave him the MVP of Lynn's wedding. I mean, Lynn didn't even get the MVP, and she was, the bride. Because Danny was every type of game. I mean, I think they were playing. What's the game in the pool where you have somebody on your shoulders and you're trying to drown the other person? Yeah, Marco Polo, on crack, right? I mean, I've never seen grown-ups. Well, that's not true. I have seen grown-ups act that childish before, but it was hilarious. Anyway, well, that's so cool. So then what was the catalyst into buying the farm or kind of elevating things to the next stage or step?
Well, the catalyst for buying the farm is not, it was a little bit, my mom was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Right. And so she was given, basically she was told she had 6 months to live. And oh my God. I know, right? So, and she was like, okay. And I was leasing a farm. My parents were living outside of Washington, D.C. My mom was working in the city. Both of them were working in the city. And my mom said, well, I want to be closer to my daughter. And so let's find a piece of land, and a house. We needed a 1-level house because didn't know what was going to happen to her physically. And, she thought we'll just have a field. We can put some retired horses out there and at least I'll be closer to you. So we were looking for places, and I came out to this farm. Used to be Brandenburg Farm, and York Eichmann and David Smith owned it. And so I came out here because it's West Virginia, but it's right over the border. And I thought, land will be cheaper. So I asked them, I said, if you know of any place, near you or whatnot. No, my mom just wants to be closer. And the farm I was renting was not too far away from here. And York came to me a couple weeks later and was like, well, how would you like to buy our farm? And I was like, in my wildest dreams, but that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
They made it possible.
Wow.
And it's so unbelievable. This place is so unbelievably special to me because my mom ended up living for 12 years here. Right.
Wow.
So there's a perfect 1-bedroom house that we set up. My parents lived in, I lived with them. So it was so, right. Because the horses and dogs and the activity, and, my mom was really good until she was wheelchair bound. And then when she was wheelchair bound, she was always completely with it mentally. So those 12 years, she got to boss us around.
You have to be the lady of the manor.
So it was, I feel like having this farm was part of the reason she lived so long with that diagnosis, because it's such a special place. And I think animals are so special, and, activity and family is so special. So, we got to be together basically the whole time. And, it's cool. Yeah.
Were the doctors just like amazed, or were they like, what are you doing? What is this? Can you bottle this? You're like, yes.
She is pretty tough. She was strong-willed, right? So, and she was like, I am not ready to go yet. And wonderful, wonderful treatment and doctors. And she fought it the whole time. Like every step of the way was, this is not going to get me, right? Like this will not get me, right? So, and it was sheer, I think, force of will. I mean, just unreal. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And again, I think horses are very special. I think dogs are very special. I think, animals are very special. Being outside is very special. Like all of these things, that we are so lucky to do every day, but we're so lucky to do, and they help so much with health, right? And how you feel, and all the things that really matter when life chucks you a curve like that. I mean, that's right. But she just was like, I'm not ready to go yet. So
no, that's amazing. And it's what's so what's so hard with any type of sickness is that the exact opposite is often prescribed. Rest, stay inside, medication that makes you tired and you don't want to go outside and do anything. And that, like, even if I'm, just tired, if I stay inside, I always feel worse. Like, I'm like, get me into the sun. Like,
right, for sure. I think that's why COVID was so hard for so many people, right? And again, we're just so lucky that we can be outside all of the time with our creatures, right? It's just good for the soul.
Yeah, I was I was thinking about this podcast, and I was brought back just to this year at Kentucky. I was in the booth with John Kyle, and we were doing some commentating, and you were on there, and I just said, Sharon's just got just this energy, and people just want to be in her space. It's just really great space. And he stopped and he said, that I think about it, from the first time I met Sharon, I felt the same way. Like, I maybe spoke 2 words to her, and I thought, I really like her. And I was thinking, and this is a roundabout way to get to that, because I actually wrote down, like, was this the energy in your household? What was it like growing up? Was this kind of how your parents were? Like, what do you think? It's hard to even put words on it, but often it's because you're around something that inspires that.
Well, I think I am very, very lucky with my parents, right? I always thought if I could just be as smart and as strong as my mom and as kind as my father, who is the world's kindest man, I would be doing all right. So I had really excellent role models.
Wow, I think you can check that box. I wasn't fortunate enough to meet your mom, but I think she would agree with me. So you know, going on from that, a lot of stuff that I've been reading lately that you've been writing has had a focus on mindfulness and energy and relationship, and obviously that is kind of the way that the world is moving, and it seems to be a focus in your daily life as well as your practices with your horses and your work. Can you talk about that a little bit, and how you kind of infiltrate that into your life?
Absolutely. Well, so I think that this sport, right? This sport, you know how hard it is, right? Like how hard it is. Oh my God. Right? I think I've always thought, I wonder, I think all sports are this hard, right? If you're trying to do something at the highest possible level, I'm assuming that, that all sports are unbelievably difficult because anything at the highest level, it takes a lot of, it just takes so much dedication and so much time and so much energy and whatnot, and we're all willing to do that, right? Like you don't, like we're all willing to give whatever it takes, right? And I have come to find meditation and mindfulness through epic failure, really, right? It was just like absolute epic failure of proportions for me that I found myself in a place where I was like, I, I can't actually work any harder. I don't know. I don't know how to, I get help from the absolute best people in the world. I do all of the things. And then I had a good friend who was like, you know, you're very talented, but I don't know if mentally you're strong enough for this. And I thought,
Wow.
okay, oh, so
Wow.
right, and it's like, okay, fair, like, thank you, right? And he's like, right, and I was like,
Thank you.
okay, here's something I haven't done, right? And because you're a type A and you're gonna go do anything, so I was
Yeah.
like, okay, so interesting, right? So let me just do some like looking into this and see what I come, like, see what happens, right?
Mhm.
And so I just started researching, right? Because that's what you do, you gather information. And then this opened up this whole world of like how the mind works and all the things you can do for that. And I had no idea. Like you don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
it's just like horses, like you just don't know what you don't know. But if you're interested, it's just so shocking how much you can learn and how much you can teach yourself and learn from others and whatnot. So literally, you've always heard, meditation or blah, 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 and breathing, da, da, da. So, I had, you know, tried that a little bit throughout my life, but it had never really, you
I think though that it for us as because I have been through this cycle a bit myself, and I think for us as eventers, because everything has been so hard, we're like, there's no way it's that easy. Like
exactly, right? Like, no,
there's no way that can work.
right? For sure, right?
Yeah.
So, like, well, there's, at that point, when he said that to me, my friend, and, I had just, it had happened when I had a bad Kentucky on Cooley show. And I just, and it was just so devastating to me. And I thought, I'll try anything, right? To see, to make a difference. And that has helped me so much. Like it has helped me so much be able to handle when things are difficult and realize the things that that it is that horses respond so well to it. And this is why I find it so interesting and why I'm so happy to share, because at the end of the day, horses are my passion, and horses respond so much to what is going, your energy level and what you're thinking and what's going on. So that's where now I'm like, I'm going to share and I'm going to tell people about it because it matters to horses. So
Right.
if you are, um, it's just fascinating to me. So, like for example, I have three very different advanced horses at the same period of time: Klaus 63, Cooley Show, and Cooley Kildare. And these three horses are so different, like so unbelievably different, right? That mentally, physically, mentally, emotionally. Klaus is super emotional, and everything, he reacts to everything. Um, Louis Cooley Show is just like the most athletic yet laid back horse ever. He's just a competitor, right? But on a daily basis, he's the laziest thing ever on. And Cooley Kildare has been the most earnest creature, like the most genuinely earnest, like tries 120% every day of his life, right? So when all three of them started to perform in the same way, right? Like they started to do the same things, and there's a lot of beauty to that. Like there's a lot. I'm saying they do a lot of the same things that are good, but then there's some things like they do some things that were the same that maybe weren't not so good, right? Oh, there's one common denominator here. And I'm talking about specific things like, getting excited at the start box or, just, very, very specific things that they wouldn't all do the same. They didn't. And all of a sudden they were, right? And I'm like, that's an energy level right there, right? Like that is an energy level that comes from me, right? So, and if I hadn't started of meditating, I wouldn't have realized the pattern of that, because what I think that mindfulness and meditation allows you to do is to be able to see patterns and go from there with that. And seeing patterns is, I think, a really, really useful thing to be able to do, to perform anything at a high level.
When you talk about seeing patterns, are you meaning like personal patterns with yourself, in your life, with your horses? Can you
all of the above? all of the above, right? Like, so patterns in your relationships with others, right? Like patterns with how you deal with your horses, patterns with how you ride your horses, right? Patterns with how you react to certain things, patterns with how how you deal with your staff, and then what the end result is, right? Because you always, like, things are always the same. Patterns between you and your fellow competitors, patterns between, everyone goes through exactly the same things, right? But it feels different. It feels like it's your own unique path, but actually it's happening to everybody. Right?
No, that's not what my live stream on Facebook says.
And I just find I find that so interesting. So I think it enables you to have a lot of compassion and empathy, right? And I think that's a really important thing in all relationships, whether it's your relationship with the horse you're riding or the people around you or anybody. I think that if you realize, we all really do go through the same things, then you have more understanding. And that's I find that so useful with my horses. I have much more understanding of, oh, like this is a strength thing, right? Like this is this will take time, but be patient and it's going to get there, right? It doesn't have to happen right this moment. It's not that they're, being bad ever. It's that, oh, they're just not there yet, either strength or education wise or whatnot. And being able to see those patterns, I just find so useful.
It's interesting how you say that, because it's almost like you can become a better advisor and coach personally for yourself, because it's like, if that's what you're doing, and we can get to this a little bit later, but that's what you're doing for your students, right? You're able to clearly look and say, it's not you, it's this. It is you, but you can fix it. Like we just need to train it, but we can take the emotion out of it, or the negative emotion out of it, and it's just a thing. Whereas with ourselves, like I often try and step back, because I'm not good at this. I'm so, if I was as hard on everybody else as I was on myself, I would I would be alone all the
Yes, for sure.
You have to stop and go, okay, if I was coaching myself, if I was stepping outside myself, what would I say? What would I do? I would never say what I'm listening to in my head. But it's almost sounding like what you're saying is that you can kind of look at things with a little bit more clarity and see them for what they are, as opposed to being, like it's the end of the world. I don't know what's going on, in a big kind of clutter of emotion, no crap.
Yes. Well, I will say seeing the patterns is definitely way easier to help other people with, right? Like you can see the patterns and I can see them in myself, but it is way harder to deal with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you are exactly right about that, right? Like, it's, if you said, like, if I, there's this wonderful book, and I'm not remembering the name of it right now, but, and basically the guy says, if you just took your inner voice and all the things you say to yourself, and you put that in a person next to you, right? And you were a person sitting next to you, telling you all of the things that you are telling yourself, you would never, ever, 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 ever be next to that person. You would like, get away from me, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, please get away from me, because that is not nice. That is not kind. That is not true, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not true. It's not any of those things. And I was like, oh, that is so accurate, right? Like, that is so accurate. And even intellectually knowing that, it's, you still beat yourself up, you still hard on yourself, you still can't control the emotion. I still do all of those things. And but I now at least know I'm doing them.
Yeah.
And right then, it's frustrating when you're like, just stop it, and you can't, right?
Yeah, but it's so funny. I like 2 days ago, like took a shower and I was like brushing my hair or something, and I just had this epiphany because I'm brushing my hair with my left hand because I broke my right collarbone, and because it was so quickly after Violet was born, I'm really struggling with body image and some weight that I was just like getting off right away, the baby fat, and then I'm stuck sitting still, right? And I came out to Dick and I said, if my body could take my brain to court, my brain would be in jail for like domestic violence, emotional abuse.
Yes.
Because
sure.
I'm like, I keep breaking myself. I'm not spending enough time with the rehabilitation and the strengthening side. I'm yelling at myself after my like body just has gone through hell with a baby and hell with this break. And I'm like, why are you still hanging on to this? I'm like, oh my, it just was this like moment of my brain would be in jail.
Yeah.
It's not okay. But I think you're like noticing that. And since that was 2 days ago. So like, but noticing that and trying to, like you said, I'm noticing those moments and just trying to even rephrase how I say it. Like, I was riding the Peloton and I asked Tick, I said, do you think if I keep riding this Peloton like every day for the next, 3 months that like I won't be fat anymore? And he was like, well, it's like, first of all, but in that moment, I thought that is a horribly mean thing to say to myself. It's not true. Like,
of course, right? It's
not as fit as I would like to be, but there's definitely a better way to ask that question or speak and whatnot. So like, while Tick was kind of frozen in fear of trying to figure out how to respond.
Poor Tick.
This is one of those tricky moments. I have to say exactly the right thing.
Yep.
I said, don't answer that question.
That was nice of you.
Yeah. But it is just such an interesting thing. And if the practice of meditation, which I need to get back to, it kind of comes and goes in my life, can help with that, like what at this stage of the game, like what percentage of your, your learning, your self-improvement, your all of that, do you feel like is on your technical side or on the emotional side? Could you put a percentage on that? That's kind of a broad question.
Oh, it's a great question. It goes back and forth. It does go back and forth, but I believe in learning something new every day. I believe in doing the things you have to do every day to get to stay good, to be good, to get better, to learn something new every day. Like, I think these things really are what the human being craves, right? Is progress and knowledge and learning things. So I would say to you, I read or listen to something new every morning, right? Like something that I want to, and I meditate every morning and I exercise every morning, and then I like this morning I had lessons with Bettina Hoy, right? So there you're working your technical, right? Like, and so I believe percentage wise, it goes back and forth depending on where we are in the season, right? Where I am, where I feel like I need the work, right? And if I feel like, whoa, I need some more technical, I need to work on my technical skill, then I will go and do that. And then I'm like, oh, the technical still feels pretty good, but emotionally I'm struggling a bit, then I will hone more in on that. So that percentage changes, but I do prioritize these things every day.
What do your, like I know it's, none of us have a normal day, but what would your, daily practice look like a normal average Tuesday?
An average Tuesday. Well, a normal Tuesday, a normal Tuesday, I wake up early because I think that things I read in my meditation and my work on the mind that waking up early, that is a really good thing to do. So I wake up at 5, so I have time to meditate, to exercise. I drink a cup of tea, and I try and I'm not I feel like I'm not a Pollyanna. I have lots of issues, right? So, but these things help me deal with my issues, right? So these things make my day better, right? If I can start off doing these things, my day is better. I will ride my horses better. So then in the summer, I'm on my first one, 7:30. It's a little late in the winter if it's colder. And then I ride for the day. I teach, I do my riding first. I teach in the afternoon. And then my evening routine is, I'm working on it. I do not have a good evening routine yet.
What makes you normal is not being perfect. It's okay.
So my evening routine used to be drink a glass of wine, and that was super easy, and I really liked that. I thought that was great, right? And then
just one, you're good.
That's
heart health, basically.
So still figuring out what makes the evening better, but Henrik, definitely, my fiance, makes my evenings way better.
I didn't realize there was a fiance. When did that happen?
Yeah, Valentine's Day last year, not this year, but last year.
Oh my God! Congratulations! Yeah. I'm sorry, I missed the message.
It's totally okay. Like we've been together. We've been together so long now. So
how long? So you guys are basically, if you were in New Zealand, you'd be common law married. Like what? How long have you guys been together?
15 years.
You just knew if you kept chipping away, one day you'd say yes.
Exactly. So he's been very, very patient. I'm very lucky.
That is so awesome. Congratulations. And so when you, back to your morning practices, like how long would you meditate? What does your, like exercise wise, what does that look like for you? Like, what is that? 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 3, an hour?
Depends on the day, all of the above. The meditation is usually 15 minutes, 15 minutes to half an hour, but I drink a cup of tea first and just sit there and, read something, learn something, do something, there's just something to catch my interest. That's, I'm not on Facebook. So that's, I think when most people will scroll through Facebook, I just, find something else. It's my version of Facebook. And then I meditate. And then exercise wise, I'm a believer, because I have a lot of metal in me, like, this, right? Like the feeling of when you have a lot of metal in you, you're limited with what you can do. So I do a Pilates yoga weight thing. It's a series of DVDs that I've been doing for years now, and I really, really like them. And then I have an elliptical. So for my cardio, I use the elliptical.
Right. It's so handy, isn't it? That's like, I used to be a huge Orange Theory person, but the time restraints to get there, it takes 2 hours out of my day. I just couldn't keep up with it. And there was, I loved it, but if something came up, like it came up, and then I felt horrible not going,
not going.
Yeah. And so then that, I'm like, that inner struggle. So having a routine that you can do at home and that you feel you can repeat, what it takes like 3 months to get that habit ingrained. But once you feel like you can do it, then there's really not a reason not to do it, I guess.
Right. No, and there's a wonderful book, Atomic Habits, that is fantastic. And it is, how to form any habit, right?
Okay.
So these have all been like these are things that I read that book and I was like, oh, I can do this. And I can turn these things. I think it's Atomic Habits.
Oh, Atomic. I was like, who's Tom McCabbott?
Yeah, no.
Atomic.
Atomic Habits.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I think that's great. I think Chris Burton told me to read that book.
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah. So they're like, this is share what you know, share things that work for you, right? Like it matters. So this is that morning routine. It's now a habit, right? Like, and you can turn anything into a habit. Like, I love that about, like, I think you can teach a horse anything. I think you can actually teach a person anything. I think you can teach yourself anything. So, so these things that I find useful, I've tried to turn into habits. So like that morning routine is just a habit now. And if I don't do it, I feel bad. So, and it makes me feel better in my day. So I always, like in my teaching and when I teach clinics, I say, well, you have a bad habit, replace it with a good habit, right? And you can, because you can teach yourself anything, right? So just say, make good habits, and you can start small, and it's turning them into small things. Just repetition. Through repetition, your body and your mind learns to do anything. And I absolutely love that, because I believe that about myself, and I believe that about my horses too. I know it to be true with them, right? I think, and it's so I think that's just, it's so fun to see what you can do.
Well, I mean, I think that is, I say that to myself and to my students a lot, because that isn't brain science. I mean, developing more myelin, you have to keep making the mistake and fixing it. That's what makes it a new habit. And so instead of getting mad at yourself, oh, I can't believe I did that again. Because I used to do that all the time. I'd be trying to correct a positional thing. And 10 minutes later, you notice you're slouching again, or your left hand is doing this weird thing again, or your right knee is pointing the wrong direction. And you're like, I just told myself to stop doing that. But it's like, if you can fix it 50 times, you're 50 times more likely to create a new habit, because you're building more myelin in your brain. You're firing off more, so it actually is helpful to keep fixing it, which is, I think, part of it. For sure. We don't, we just beat ourselves up on the mistake, and actually it takes the mistake to get better,
Of course, right? Of course. I always say failure, right? Failure, that is your greatest information stream, if you will let it, right? Like when it's wrong and you've done it completely wrong, you're actually getting better if you see it as, like, if you learn from that mistake, right? Like if you can take it and say, I know it's awful, it sucks, and you don't want, like, no one wants to make a mistake. You don't want to, for sure, you don't want to get it wrong, especially in a moment that really matters. But if it's already happened, you better learn from it, right? Like you better take that and get better from that. I always say being an expert is just making every mistake there is to make in a very small field, and then you're an expert.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's the hard part. I mean, it's ego, right? And everybody has it. Like, and the first person that pointed it out to me said something, again, it was a friend who said something about my ego, and I'm like, I don't have an ego. Like, I think I suck. And he said, basically, you do, because you care so much about making these mistakes and about what other people are thinking and what this judgment of yourself. And I'd never thought of that coin of the side of ego. And that's, then of course I went out and got, like, Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth. And I was like, what is this? Long. Yeah. I mean, that was a lot of trips back and forth to school with that on my radio. But, it's just kind of an interesting side of things, and learning to manage that, or have it at an appropriate level of ego when you need it and when you don't, for like certain learning experiences, so that you allow yourself to be an idiot and learn, and it's okay. And then in certain performance situations, if you need to puff up a little bit, that's okay too, be proud of what you need to do. But it's kind of like, you know, that we laugh here all the time because it's like that Goldilocks theory, right? Not too little, not too much, just right.
That's right. It's the middle.
Just right. So I think that is like something we can't hear enough. Again, it's something easy to teach and sometimes hard upon doing it personally. But again, that's creating a better habit of, right, of noticing it. And
Of course, it's that middle ground, right? Is where where like what we all actually want is right that middle ground of everything, and it's just you go from one extreme to the other, right? Pretty quickly. I do, right? So
Yeah.
at least if I can
Totally.
be aware of it, right? Then it's like no, there's just that sweet spot in the middle where it's actually so much easier than you think it is.
Totally. It's we do a lot of stuff in the round pen here, and I actually find that a really great place to separate myself from myself on the horses, and learned it from obviously from David and Karen, a base level of what we were doing, and then have been fortunate enough through Tick and a lot of his circle of people to just learn a lot of interesting perspectives, everything from a completely like passive leadership to more like Dan James, who does like liberty work and trick training for movies. So he works in huge contrast, and the liberty work in general, like Linda Pirelli will say, it's it's mastering our own energy, because you've got no rope, you've got no halter. The only thing you've got is your energy. And it's really a fun place. And I was in the round pen the other day with a horse of mine that I just couldn't quite get a read on what was, I just couldn't quite get a read on what was going on when I was in the saddle. And one of my girls was just sat up on top of the round pen, and we were in there for probably an hour just chatting and watching the horse back and forth. And it was so interesting because all of a sudden I felt like I had stepped outside of what was going on in my mind when I was riding the horse, because I get, without even knowing it, I was being very egocentric with my thoughts on the horse and what was going wrong. I'm doing this wrong. I need to do that better. I need this. I need that. We're actually just a young horse that made a couple of mistakes every now and then. And I watched him make identical learning things, like just on a small jump at Liberty by himself. I just wanted to watch him. And I saw him make 3 mistakes and different mistakes, and then just learn from it and recognize when I was on him, every time he was making a mistake, I was just changing the question, changing, which I know, but this is a horse that I just put a lot of pressure on. And so I just never gave him a chance to just figure it out and realize it's not me, it's not him, it's just this situation. And, so it's fun when you can but I just felt like in that situation was able to remove all the emotional weight and just watch for a little bit, which is kind of, again, circling back to the meditation type thing, it just feels like it gives you a little distance in time, a little distance in time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, right. And that is that's a great example of that. And I love that, right? I love that, that you just took the time to do that one, right? That takes time and, interest. And then it sounds like you read the situation really well, like when again, just by watching it, right? And that's so cool.
It's but I think, you get to the stage of the game that we're at a little bit, you're like, surely we got to start looking at this from some other, the inspiration comes from different places, and our want to get better comes from different places. Right.
So I had the most, like you, like that experience with you, I had the most interesting experience the other day with horses, and it changed my perspective. And I was like, okay, I am fascinated by this. So I do a little bit of breeding. But I don't have my broodmares and my babies at my farm because we have so many competition horses. And I think I can only do one thing well. So I've tried to have broodmares and babies here before, and it was so stressful for me and so awful, right? Because I didn't have people that knew how to do that specifically. And we really, to me, that takes time and expertise and things, and it just did not work for me here, right? So I have them at a man down the road who just does the most beautiful job, and the babies are so well handled and they're so beautiful, and I take them when they're 2 years old. But this year I just had 2 foals, and I had a yearling at his farm still, and I limit myself how many I have with him. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to need to get the yearling out of there. That's fine. I think the yearling will be okay to, to go out with some of my older horses. And okay, wow. So we brought this yearling home, and he's beautiful, and he's sweet, and he's well handled, and he's kind. And I turned him out in a field with another broodmare, another yearling filly, and a little quarter horse mare that's that is ridden by a kid, right? And I thought that'll be fine for him. Well, this little quarter horse mare was like, I'm gonna kill you, right? Like to this yearling, right? She was so awful, so awful, and she basically ended up running him through the fence, right? And it was, I've never seen. It was, I had this new, all of a sudden, this new perspective, and this new, because I believe horses are very earnest, and I believe they go the way they're ridden. And I tend to see really, all of the good, all of their really good qualities. And then watching this little mare, right? This little 15-year-old quarter horse mare, and she was like, I'm going to kill you. And I don't actually care. Right. And she, and teeth bared. And I was like, oh my God, horses can be super dominant and aggressive, right? So and it was such an eye-opening perspective for me, which I know sounds silly, right? It sounds silly. Of course they can be. Of course horses are dangerous, right? Let's state the obvious, right? Horses are dangerous too, right? But I was like, I've never actually. I was like,
seen that.
Wow, they're actually really dangerous, right?
Right.
And I was like, my God,
So
I didn't know, right? I just didn't know, right? I've just never seen a horse act that aggressively and was literally going to kill this little baby, right? And I think it was because he was a baby, right? And usually you think of, they're going to take care of a baby or whatnot.
Right.
I don't know if it was because there was a herd of 3 females, 3 mares, right? And then I put a boy out with them, and obviously he was gelded, but I just don't know. It was so interesting to me. And it just gave me this sort of brand new perspective of, oh, right.
Well, you forget because they're so domesticated. It's you think, but they're prey animals. So when they're threatened, and most of the time, it's the difference between them being born into a first world country. We're not worried about food. We're not worried about a roof over our head.
Exactly.
So our horses, we get to motivate them by curiosity and play. And,
so true.
Sometimes a little bit of pressure that doesn't even elevate into discomfort. But, then you have that, the other side of them is that prey animal and the instincts that come out from survival. And it's obviously something about that baby inspired that type of you need to die or I'm going to die type of.
Right. It was, I just found it so fascinating. And it was, just like you taking the time to watch your young horse. I was like, oh, I just learned something, right? I just learned something watching this situation.
Yeah.
And he's fine. My baby's fine and everybody's fine and it's all fine. But I was like, wow, and I was actually kind of inspired by it, right? I was like, oh, right, they can take care of themselves sometimes too, right?
There's another layer in there for sure. That's so interesting. Sure. Yeah, we have this really neat lady named Elsa St. Clair. Have you heard of Elsa?
No.
So she basically did a lot of. She did a documentary called Taming Wild. And so it started because she wanted to, a friend asked her basically if she thought a horse would ever choose to be ridden. And so
great question.
Yeah. Right. She's like, And so she had a film crew come out, and for a year, basically, she was in this huge field and just basically observed and played with certain things back and forth to see if this horse would ever choose to be ridden. Anyway, she's come to our place. She's coming again this winter. So I'll tell you when she's coming over. You can come. She does it.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Clinic here. It's amazing. But her perspective comes from passive leadership. So she observes, you know, and what's interesting is in most other fields other than ours, you know, there's certain people are required years of observation before they're even allowed touch, like working with like gorillas or apes or anything like that. They have to observe them in the wild for a certain amount of hours, right? Even if you're flying a plane, you have to ride next to somebody that's flying the plane for X amount of time. You know, and with horses, where it's like, oh, we're trainers. But she's got an amazing eye for her dynamics and watching horses in the field, and how she starts with them is that it's actually kind of, she just mirrors their actions and things like that. But it was very, very interesting watching her work with some of the different horses. And we had this one mare here for a little while, and we could not get her happy out in the field. And she was very spooky to ride, like super, super spooky to ride, and very kind of marish and up. And then we ended up putting her with, and she was here for about a month and a half or something, and she just never quite settled. And then we put her with this half pony mare that always had a presence about her. Like she always just had, like, she'd look at you sideways and you're like, okay, I'm not a horse, you know, like where you're like, all right, she doesn't have this energy. Well, we put this other mare out with her, and it was so crazy interesting because the mare we put out with her, the one that has been so up, she finally laid down. Like she finally started sleeping. She finally started resting. The spooks, like there were other things certainly that were playing into that as well. But as soon as I started seeing this, I thought I need to be more like that mare when I ride this horse. Like she never kicked her. She never did anything. She was just like, you could tell she knew what was going on. This is your space. This is my space. I've got all of this. So you can take a nap. And, and yeah, it was really cool. And Elsa, I worked with this mare with Elsa and we put two mares in the round pen and watched them work together and how they work together. And then we kind of put the person in there, and I was working back and forth, and then just assuming that type of leadership on her back was, I just never, like, if she was doing something spooky or something like that, I just always kind of assessed it. Like, I see what you see. And if it was relevant, then we'd go over and check it out. If it wasn't relevant, my attitude just had to be, it's not relevant. Like we're going over and doing this. It doesn't matter. Like, and not even make, you know, like how I treat my kids sometimes, like I'm just not putting energy into that space.
Yes.
And, you know, but it was crazy how actually watching it live in the field and seeing how it changed and influenced her attitude made such a difference. Like I don't even remember her spooking like the last 6 months I had her. And what was really funny was that, her and her owner didn't really get on. Her owner didn't actually buy her for her. She bought her for somebody else. And then the mare ended up coming here. But they both had a relationship like that. Like she didn't like it when she spooked. She got really worked up about it. And she came down to ride her, and I said, oh, she's great. She's like barely spooking, anything like that. And then she went to hop on her, and she was spooking at the mounting block. I was like, what? This horse is making me look like an idiot. She's been here for 6 months. And but it just went back to that. All of a sudden she was kind of it was just a different type of leadership, a different type of energy that she instantly was like, you don't see what I see. You know?
No, they know the energy around them so well, right? Like it's so, you know, it's so obvious, you know, when you watch horses, and you always know what the rider on top of them is thinking, you know, or, you know, for sure, because there's an energy to a thought, right? And that horse will tell you whatever someone is thinking, right? Like they're like, oh, this one's nervous, right? Or whatnot, you know, and I'm like, it's so clear. But I think that's so cool to, you know, I agree with you, to watch them out in the field. You always kind of know what's going on, right? You know what's going to happen and whatnot.
I can't remember who said it. I'm sure a lot of people have said it. As always, when I have like an epiphany, I read a book somewhere and I see like 10 other people have already had this epiphany and written about it, you know? And I'm like, why didn't I just read this book? But it was kind of about being, you know, actually being more honest with the horses when you're on them, and that looking at it through that lens, that if you are scared, just saying I am scared, because it's almost that if you are scared, then if the horse picks up on the energy that you're scared of something, but you are trying to hide it, they then get twice as fearful. Whereas if you kind of, which is often why you see like horses behave so well for young children, you know, because they're just so genuine in their energy and their emotions, you know, and it's like, if you can actually hand it over, most of the time the horses go, I gotcha. Like, it's fine.
For sure. For sure, right? That's why they're amazing creatures, right? They're
Mhm.
amazing, and it's why, they're used for therapeutic riding and things
Yeah.
like that, because they're just, they read whatever is going on, right?
Yeah.
It's so cool.
It's crazy. So in thinking about this, like what is your because this is one I'm just circling around a lot. What is your relationship with pressure and when there is pressure and when you have to be real about that at the competition, and the energy that you feel like that puts off with your horses? How do you conceptualize that idea?
Great question. Great question.
Sorry.
No, it's a great question. And I do think you have to know how your horse responds to adrenaline, right? Like, because that pressure is adrenaline, right?
Mhm.
For competitors, right? Like that pressure is a form of adrenaline. I think you can train adrenaline. So I think you can train yourself to hype yourself up, tone yourself down, to do what you need to do to suit the horse you're sitting on, who also responds to that pressure, adrenaline, whatever you want to call it, right? So like Cooley on show was like, again, he's so good in a competition because he's so lazy at home. He was such a
Mhm.
competitor, right? Like, or
Mhm.
is such a competitor. He gets to a show and he has like, bring it on, right? Whereas at home you can barely make him canter, right?
He's like, it's Cooley on show for a reason.
Yes, exactly. It is it's so funny. And then Klaus, he is very, very, very sensitive to any sort of pressure. So
Yeah.
I have to really, I've just been very, very slow with him, because I've had to train him to control his own adrenaline, his own
Mhm.
pressure. And I definitely have to control mine with him, right? Like,
Mhm.
because there's too much pressure, he does not do well with that. So
Mhm.
you have to, um, I think you have to really be able to know how your horse is going to perform their best and respond accordingly.
Mhm.
Um, Hopefully that's where I do think that, being able to control your breath, and where meditation has helped me be able to physiologically control what my body is doing, so that that energy is appropriate for whatever horse I happen to be sitting on.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you do a lot of different breathing exercises when you're riding?
No, I just try and breathe. Like, I do. I know I do. Right? Like, I do. I with Klaus, I always whisper under my breath to him, "Son, champions, they breathe." Right?
I love that. I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
Because he is holding his, like, he is absolutely, like, he tries so hard,
Yeah.
and he holds his breath, right? So
Mhm.
if you're holding your breath, you're not actually performing well. So
Mhm.
when I whisper to him, "Son, champions, they breathe," right? It helps me breathe, right?
Mm.
When he is, like, so keen, or so you feel like, oh no, he's not with me, right? Like, he's
Mhm.
put so much tension in this. I have to get rid of that tension.
Right.
So, and breathing covers so many things. It's that thing that's so unbelievably simple. You can't believe it can possibly be that simple, right?
Right.
But it
Yeah.
is there right in front of you. Like, the breath controls the mind, right? So
Mhm.
breath controls the body, right? Like, you can slow your own heart rate, which helps control the thoughts, right? Your breath and out breath puts your shoulders down, right? And your shoulders being down is a balance point, right? Like, so
It's
these
like it's
things that
all
are,
connected.
it's, I know, oh my God. And you think, God, it can't possibly be that
Mhm.
simple. And it's not, but yet it is, right?
Mhm.
Like, there's
Yeah.
so many things to learn, to know, technically, mentally, physically, all of the things. But breathing is a really, really
Mhm.
important thing to do,
Yeah.
no matter where you're at in
Yeah.
your own, your own journey, your own,
Mhm.
riding journey, competitive journey, whatever. I mean,
It's I was
breathing is important.
I was at the I had to go to the dentist yesterday. I had 5 cavities yesterday.
Oh.
I was like, I
Oh
just
my
feel like
God.
putting myself through, torture. So I had just been canceling appointments, and then I did my collarbone, so I couldn't be in the chair. And then finally I'm like, okay, I can handle it. So, but I said to the lady, the doctor, when she came in and she's getting everything ready, and I said, I'm so sorry, but I really need laughing gas. Like, I'm so nervous, and you got me blocked down for 2 hours. And she's like, I think we call it nitrous when you're over 8. And, I was
So
like, oh yeah,
laughing
that,
gas works. Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Just give me some.
yeah, I don't care what it is. And but it just brought it back when you said that, because she's working away back, like in the farthest tooth, like in the back of my head, and I'm so uncomfortable, right? And I still have the nitrous, and surely you can't feel anything, but you hear it and you smell it.
Yeah.
And she goes, just, I know you've got your mouth open, but just make sure you're breathing through your nose. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm breathing through my nose, like I'm trying. And obviously the nitrous is, making all of these things a little bit hazy anyway. But what I noticed in that situation is I spent the next 3 minutes trying to just breathe in and out of my nose. And those 3 minutes, I didn't think once about the grinding that was going on in my teeth, because I was just focusing on the breath so intently. Driven actually out of almost embarrassment, because I could just picture myself like,
like having a panic attack. Yeah.
And they're like, oh, please, dear. And but it all of a sudden became very important to just breathe through my nose, which, with horses too, they're just nose breathers. They're not mouth breathers, which is an interesting thing as well. But it was a mental moment that I just was marked by, like, oh my God, breath is so, you don't think it can, but it can so change. Like, I was sweating, like cold sweating, everything clenched. And then I just started focusing on that breath. And for 3 minutes, I just was like, fine. It took the energy somewhere else, I guess. I don't know.
It's so true, right? And it seems so silly, but it's not.
What do you say? Because I'm sure you've had this. I have students say this all the time. They say, I know I don't breathe. What do I do? Like, how do you advise people in their course? They come out of the ring and they're beet red because they haven't breathed for 90 seconds or whatnot. How do you handle that?
Practice.
Yeah.
Practice and repetition, right? Repetition, right? Because you hear it, I hear this, and I used to say it, right? I'm like, people have been telling me to breathe for my whole life. And like for a while, it was really hard. I'm like, I would, like at one point in my life, I thought I must have exercise-induced asthma, right? Because I would, when I first started going cross country, I would get this awful cough when I was done, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm just not fit enough. I gotta, work out more. So, work out more, and it would still happen. And then I was like, I must have some sort of problem, right? So I went to the doctors to get tested for exercise-induced asthma, right? And I felt so silly about doing that, because I was like, no, you just actually aren't breathing, right? But then I'm like, well, how do you breathe, right? Like, it takes repetition. It takes time, right? It takes practice. It takes dedication too. Oh, it's not working. Don't give up. Don't give up, right? Like, don't give up. It's going to be okay. Eventually, you're going to learn how to take a full breath in and let it out, and be able to do that at any point in time, right? But it takes time. You can't rush things. It took me decades to learn to breathe, right?
So once you realized that it wasn't asthma, how did you practice breathing? Did you just think about it when you were riding, or?
I didn't, at that point. I hadn't, this was a long time ago, so I hadn't even heard of meditation or, breathing or control or any of the things, right? But I realized I didn't have exercise-induced asthma because they told me I didn't. So I was like, okay, then I'll just keep going, right? Like, so you just keep going. And because I never actually shared that with anybody, so I kept that to myself, and I just thought, I'll just work harder, right? And so that's what you do. So that's what I did, and if I had shared, and that's why I share these things, because, maybe a couple years ago, I found out that, one of our top competitors did the same thing, thought they had exercise-induced asthma, right? And I was like, oh, see, we're all the same. And who knew, right? Who knew? So you have to share these things to say, you know what, it's okay, right? Like we all think these, we all think there's something wrong, right? We all think there's, oh my God, and what can I do to work harder, right? To make this better? When the answer is just breathe, right? But then it's okay. It is okay, because I have people say all the time, well, like you just said, like, I can't breathe. And I'm like, there's this beautiful thing called repetition, right? And I say that all the time. The mother of all skill is repetition. So just don't give up. Keep repeating. Eventually you learn, and practice when you're not in the hard situation. Practice when you're not, going cross country, right? Practice when you're just sitting at your kitchen table, right? Just practice it. And there's 18 million apps that'll teach you how to breathe, just so you know, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many, you're never reinventing the wheel. Like what you said about the books, right? You come to an epiphany and then you realize, oh yeah, it's been written about 5, or, that's true of everything, right? And like someone's been through this before, someone has gone through the same journey before. There's probably a book or 2 or 10 or 50 million about it out there somewhere. Just sort of be willing to listen, pay attention. Maybe someone says something interesting, follow up on it, right? Like go, you can, the information that's out there is unbelievable, right? Like you can learn or find out about anything. But then I also think you have to be careful. I think you have to make sure that you're on your own path, right? Like I think probably everyone breathes ever so slightly different, right? In your own way, and your own the sweet spot, right, that works for you, whether you're talking about breathing or riding or a morning routine, an afternoon routine, whatever it is. It's that sweet spot that works for you, that middle ground that works for you. I think that's a pattern. I realize it doesn't actually matter what you're talking about. It's all the same, right? Like it's all the same, right? Again, so there's that, I call it the sweet spot, because I like that term, right? It makes me feel happy, right? And I'm like, I'm looking for the sweet spot, right?
Totally. Well, and I think that so much is that actually when we start to look at the learning with more curiosity instead of desperation, like I got to do that because I got to get better, then it becomes you can put more flexibility into what you're learning and what you're picking up, and create it as your own. And I want to go back to what you said a second ago, because it actually was a really interesting point about the breathing that I hadn't thought about. But you said practice it when there's not the thing. But what that reminded me of was surely you've broken ribs, like I'm sure.
I actually have not actually broken ribs. I've broken many other bones, but never a rib.
Going through it. But I have done it a handful of times, and I didn't realize how much fascia was getting locked around my rib cage over a long period of time, and which was making it incredibly hard for me to take a deep breath. And I didn't really notice until I had a body worker a couple of years ago come and start working on some stuff, because I was getting really bad headaches and really bad issues in my neck. And she started working on my ribs. And I just all of a sudden, over the period of 2 or 3 sessions, could take a deep breath. And it was like
so cool.
Insane feeling to have my lungs fill with air.
Yeah.
And then be able to breathe. I was like, oh my God. Because she's, feeling around, saying, whoa, can you take a deep breath? I'm like, yeah. Like, okay. Yeah. And but it was a really neat feeling. And so when you said everybody breathes a little bit differently, I think that's probably an exercise that we could all use at home, is not even to practice just saying breathe, but how can you take a full deep breath of air, in a non-stressful situation, in that course, when you're not stressed out and you're breathing normally, see if you can even take that breath deeper, so that your practice at home is just at like 150%. And then when you get to the horse show, even if it's a shallow breath, it's still quite full.
Yes.
Backing up and practicing in that space, because since this time I broke a couple of ribs, and I am constantly, because I know what that full breath feels like.
Yeah.
Now I'm constantly working on, I mean, every day for 4 weeks, I've been working on finding that deep breath, and every day I get a few more, but I mean, the first little while, you know, like I'm still on, like, maybe I get 15 deep breaths a day, you know, like, but I know what it feels like, so I can keep getting there. Hi, Henrik.
Sinead says hi, babe.
But I think that's a really, I just wanted to mark that because that's going to help me. I'm going to use that. So I don't want people to miss it.
Well, and I just to be like, I don't want people to miss this either, right? Which is, I've never broken ribs, but it took me years and years and years to be able to take a deep breath. Like it's taken me years of practice, right? And I had a physical therapist working me, but from other injuries, right? And she's like, "Oh no, you don't know how to take a deep breath." Right? And I was like, "I'm trying." Right? Like,
Same thing. You're like, this isn't it.
This is not it, right? And I'm like, oh, right. So I actually think, like, I think that's so interesting. It's got to be somewhat universal, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've had really good friends say it to me. I don't know if this breathing thing, like this, take a deep breath, I can't do it. And then I end up losing my breath, right? Like I can't do it. And then it makes me anxious. And then I end up gasping, right?
Yeah.
So I actually think it's also a universal thing, right? So I would say, you know, with anything, it's repetition, right?
Yeah.
Don't give up, just repetition. And eventually you can find that big, deep breath, right?
Yeah.
And
I had a horse a few years back that had a lot of issues. And this is how I ended up finding Chinese medicine and using more Chinese medicine with my horses, because he had so many issues. He was really shutting down. But one of the, I was speaking to a horse communicator, because that's, you know, you just try every avenue. And she was great. And one of the strongest things she recommended to me, she said, "You're not breathing." And he's completely mirroring you. Like, he stops breathing completely. She's like, every time you go somewhere, you have got to start breathing. Like, he is just such a sensitive animal. He was a big French horse. Like, he was very introverted. Like, he was as slow as the day is long, but he was just, everything was inside, you know? And, but that was what she said, when you get to a new property, when you get everywhere, like, he just would go in his head and slow down. She's like, "Cause you're not breathing. You need to help him learn how to breathe." And I thought that was like really, actually pretty powerful, you know, which is so cool. You're like, well, that kind of makes sense, I guess.
But no, it's so cool. They go the way they're written, right? So whatever you're doing on there, you know, they're doing, right? It's just, I find it fascinating. I love it.
Such a mirror. So so you have a lot of, you know, you're very well renowned for, you know, producing riders and students that stay with you a long time, and also feel very safe and confident in your space. And so can you talk about that a little bit, and how you kind of, you know, because obviously it's kind of the same deal, is that you probably have several students that are quite different, you know, like your 3 different advanced horses, and how they learn and how they think. And how do you kind of manage that part of it while teaching the skill set part as well?
My gut instinct is I don't actually know, to be honest. It must be because I breathe.
I don't know. I just breathe. My lessons consist of me standing in the middle of the ring breathing. Do what you want.
No, I think that it is, everybody does learn differently. And I don't know if I am just intuitive with my students that I can pick up what might work for them. I don't think about it. I think it just happens. But I hold everyone who comes to me and works with me and stays with me, I hold them to the same standard I hold myself. And, you know, I think that people appreciate that, right? Like I don't want to, I'm not going to limit any horse that I ride. I'm going to produce them to the best of their ability. And I'll do the same with my students, right? I'm not going to limit anyone. Like, I think that, you know, I think that, and I do believe that you can accomplish anything you set out to accomplish.
Right.
So you know, and you know, for my style that works for people, I think that's great. It's just like, you know, your style that works for some horses isn't going to work with all horses, right? So, you know, I think that people that appreciate the way I do things, then they tend to stay. But, I've also had lots of people that have left, right? So,
But I think that's what's even nice now. Like, this is what we're trying to do a lot on this podcast, is exactly what, you're talking about, is just share everybody's, just stories, and that we're all the same. We're all going through the same stuff.
Of course.
It's now, like, I even feel like more lately in the last few years, like certain people get associated with certain things, and that's the people that, come and stay, and they're gravitating towards you for these different reasons. And it's obviously working because, you've got some students that are really doing quite well. You have your success, but a lot of, like Dan and a lot of people that are coming through that you're kind of like, what, you think you've seen everything or done everything, or even, it's just neat watching these stories, and that there's a technical skill, but there has to be this other motivation and confidence that's coming through. That's obviously getting, people are getting swept up in that energy at your place, which is pretty cool to see, or to be around.
I feel very lucky with, the people that come through here, and everybody works so hard, right? And, it's just, there's a real dedication, again, which that goes a long way. So,
it's funny. I did a podcast a couple of days ago. I don't even think it's out yet, with Rebecca Howard in England. And right away, it's funny. She, like, her quote that kept coming through so many times was, hard work is not enough. She's like, at some point I realized, like, hard work is not enough. And so I had to find this other path that worked for her, moving to England, kind of getting around these certain people. And she's like, once I just realized hard work wasn't enough, there had to be something else to get to that next jump, and everybody, what she found and what she did was independent and individual to her. But I think you're so right, is that everybody works so hard. So then finding your space in there that kind of, gets you kind of to your next learn or your next jump is kind of fun.
It is fun. And I find it really interesting, that I think, like, hard work isn't enough, but then you have to be really aware of some things. And I find this so fascinating, but, I've never tried to be a really good teacher. But I am a good teacher, right? So I find that so fascinating to me, right? Like, so here's something I don't actually try, like I enjoy education a lot, right? But I never thought, oh, I'm gonna, like, it was never, I never specifically thought about being a teacher, right? Or a coach or anything. I just happen to be good at it, right? But I'm like, oh, nothing is just happens to be, right? Like, I think I've had a lot of good coaching, a lot of good instruction. And I think there's something to be said for, that which you don't strive for, that you don't put, right, all, like, every hope and dream on is just easier, right? And I find that really interesting in my, my competitive career as a rider. I think about that a lot because I strive so hard for that. And I find it super interesting, right? Oh, well, maybe just a little bit less might be the thing you need, or whatnot. And you're always playing with things, right? You're always trying to figure out what gets you to that next level, what makes you that bit better, no matter how far you've gotten. So I just, and it's just, that it is that curiosity, that fascination, that, that being open to things, it's, I love the natural horsemanship. I love working with cowboys, right? Because, there's so many, observations, right? They're so clear about their observations. And one of them is like, well, if it's not working with your horse, do exactly the opposite and just see what happens. Right? And I think that if we were all willing to do those things more often, right? No, why don't you just do exactly the opposite? Just see what happens. At least it's information, right? Like, it's a learning curve that you're going to have more information then, right? So I think things like that are so cool.
Well, I think it keeps you like one step in a realistic, I don't know if realistic is the right word, but one foot on a different train, because we get so on a competition performance avenue lane, and that's very linear. You know, we do this, we do this, we do this. And if you compare that with other sports, okay. But in our sport, we're working with an animal.
And, yes, you know, that's the big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can go a little lateral, and to just make sure to keep those perspectives that aren't on a timeline, you know, like well, we've got to go to this event, this event, and this event, and I've got to drop that score by 0.5 in order to be competitive with those guys that are over there. And so it can, and whereas that those goals and that knowing is very, very important, it can be all consuming, and then you miss the big picture, right? What is happening? What is going on? You know, like what is happening? It's and often what's so funny is that it shows up. I have found in the history, when I look back at my horses in moments where it's not gone well, is the connection or lack for the lack of connection with the horse shows up on the flat in the connection. Like it's not there. It goes away.
Of course.
You know, like when there's a conversation or something that happens in front of a jump, or there's a miscommunication, it's because the connection is just not there. So you're kind of, you know, it's so important to have both sides. And those guys that are, you know, have real working horses, that the horses are learning their lateral movements by literally cutting cows. Like it is very clear, or that they're observing in the round pen all the time without a timeline. They have just developed such an eye and a key way to think and see things that we're not always seeing, you know, like, and it really is a great perspective. And if, you know, if we can keep telling ourselves that it's just as important at a certain point, you know, like it's probably always important, but there is an amount of skill that you have to have. Like if you're going to be jumping jumps, you have to work on your eye. You have to work on your technique. There's a certain element of that you have to have the skill set. And then, but almost in an equal sense is that you've got to have the horse psychology, the behavior side of it, the eye for it, the energy for it, you know, like, so it's just, it's kind of balancing all of those things. And those guys just have such a good, they're the experts of that, right? Like that's, that's what they do.
No, it's so good.
Well, cool. So, okay. I'm going to get to the questions because I could keep having this conversation all day long.
Me too.
I love it. But we have these 5 questions that hopefully you got a chance to look at them. And we wrap all of our podcasts with these, so they're pretty fun. So are you ready to crack on with these?
I'm so ready.
Deep breath. Hold it at the bottom. What is the biggest lesson a horse has taught you about yourself?
I thought about this one, and I don't have a specific answer. I will say that my horses on a daily basis teach me something about myself, right? And sometimes that's you're doing a great job, Sharon, right? And sometimes that's, you need to calm down, Sharon, right? Right. And sometimes it's you need to back off, Sharon, right? And sometimes it's, oh, you actually need to, you know, step it up a bit, right? Like on a daily basis, if you actually listen to your horses, they're always telling you something about yourself. And if you choose to listen, right? And, you know, half the time I ignore them. Right? That's just the mood today. So you're going to have to deal with it.
That's where we are.
But no, I do think they are, you know, the lessons learned, you know, are immense, right? Immense. And, you know, the specific horses that read you so well. I think all horses read you so well, right? I think they really do. So on a daily basis, they are telling me something about myself.
Right. Interesting. It's funny, like you say that, and the answer to that question a lot of times has been patience. But I actually think this is a layer deeper, because it's like they teach you how to be a good listener, like if you want to hear it.
For sure. Right. For sure. It's really interesting. So I started taking dancing lessons last year because Sandy Phillips told me it would help my dressage. And she told me this, you know, years and years ago, but I was like, I don't think I'm a dancer. I don't think that. So, but last year I was like, okay, if this is going to help my dressage, I'm going to go start taking dancing lessons. So I started taking dancing lessons, and I was like, okay, now I think I know what it means to be one of my horses, right? Because you're a follower, right? Like I'm being led and you're following, but it is a partnership, right? And I was like, this is so fascinating, right? And I know as a like when I love my dancing lessons. Like it's the closest thing to riding a horse I've ever found, right? Like there's such a connection between you and the person you're dancing with, and the aids can be so subtle but so clear. And when there's an energy that's working together, it's just the funnest, coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
So, but I also have great appreciation now for, oh, right, like my horses are actually just listening to everything I'm doing on them, because as a follower, all I'm doing is I'm following these cues to the best of my ability. The more relaxed I am, the better I am at it, right? And you know, I've only danced with, I have lessons in Florida and lessons here. So two professionals, right? Two professionals. So they're very good at what they do. So they're good leaders, right? And it makes you feel like I'm like, I can dance, like I can do anything. I can dance. Right? Yes. And I've kind of felt that way from the beginning. I'm like, oh, a good leader. I was like, oh, a good leader, right? Like a good, like be a good leader for your horse, right? And know that they're just trying to do what you're doing. And I find that so cool, right? So that's been so eye-opening to me, and it's really made the connection with my horses even better, like even better, right? So that's how I really know that intimately well now. The lessons they teach me, you know, it's like, oh yeah, they are just telling you exactly what you are doing up there,
right?
And
Wow,
I love
that's
that.
cool. That's funny because Tick always, he's been on and on. He wants to take ballroom dance lessons.
Right? Oh, tell him to do it. Oh my God, it's so cool.
And I was like, I want to play tennis. And tennis is the only sport that he does every sport, like any sport, you name it, like he can do it. But tennis, he was like, meh. And I was like, well, then I'm not going dancing. And
so won't go dancing either.
Well, we started taking tennis lessons last year, but it's interesting that you say that about the dancing, because I've always loved to dance. But then I took a few dance lessons years and years ago, and I hated taking the dance lessons because I felt like I actually, now that you say that, I just couldn't get my timing right. I couldn't get the rhythm right in the lesson, because normally if I was at the club, right, like I was like dancing around dance, or like just going with the music, or I lived in Georgia for a while, and we used to go to when all the swing dancing was really popular. And it's, if you have a good leader with that, I mean, they're just spinning you all over the place, and it's fine.
No, it's so fun.
But when I was trying, that's so funny that you said that. But I never wanted to take dance lessons again, because I'm like, I can't take the lessons. But it's probably because I got so tense with somebody telling me what to do. My timing was all screwed up.
Yeah. Well, I go too. Like that's the other thing I love about the dancing lessons, is because I have no motive with them, right? Like I really, like when I started, I just was like, okay, I'm just sort of interested in this, but I don't really care, right?
Yeah.
You know, like what am I? And the fact that I enjoy it so much, and I realize I enjoy it so much when I'm not thinking about it, right? Like, and as soon as I start to, sort of think about what the timing and the moves are, I suck, right? But if I just let myself go, right, and just completely just like be led around and whatnot, it's so fun, and I'm so good, right? Like, and it's so interesting, right? Like I just find it so unbelievably interesting. Like I couldn't tell you right now, I've now been doing this for like a year and a half. I couldn't tell you, like I do all of the things, I waltz and I foxtrot and I tango and I West Coast swing and I East Coast swing and I do all the things. I cha-cha, like we do all of the things. Yeah. I couldn't tell you how to do any of them, right? Really? But I couldn't tell you intellectually how to, I could not tell you, right? Like I could not tell you the timing. I could not tell you the, but I can do them, right? When, when in the moment, and my dancing instructor here, he's like, you have no idea what we're doing to you. He's like, but you're very good at it, right? And I was like, it's all good for me, like it's all good, because there's no pressure to it. I'm never going to be a professional dancer. I'm not worried about it. So to me, it's such a non-pressure thing at all. But I find that really useful for when I'm in a pressure situation, right? Because I'm like, now just remember how easy it is for you to do something that just becomes muscle memory, right? When you don't think about it, right? And if you don't think about it, and so I try and apply that to when you ask that question about pressure, right? I apply that to those situations of pressure as well, and I find it so useful.
That's so crazy. Yeah, that's so interesting because that's like I always think that like that when you get that tension and that try, it's like a field blocker.
Right.
Like it's just like
Yeah,
it's
for
like
sure.
somebody is blocking the conversation
Yep.
between you and your horse. And
Yep.
and so to try and figure out the flow without blocking, you know, without the tension. That's so crazy. That's so cool. I didn't know you did that. I love that. And that just I never put that context in that why I dislike the dance lesson so much. It actually would probably be the equivalent of some like hotshot kid coming in and riding well or doing something really well and then coming in and trying to learn the technique behind it and losing all of their rhythm and feel and then just being like,
exactly.
I'm out.
Yeah, no, like this is not fun. I am not doing this. Right?
I'm going back to the club. See you guys later.
Sure. Yeah. No, but like for sure. So it's fascinating. Like it's fascinating.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you have a favorite training or competition mantra you reference regularly?
Not necessarily like I tell myself things, right? So it depends on how I'm feeling. Sometimes my big one is relax, right? Like just relax, slow your roll, sister. I say, slow your roll, sister. Or sometimes I just say, get on with it, right? Like, don't be silly, just get on with it, right? So it depends on, sort of how I'm feeling at the moment. Am I trying too hard? Then it's, relax, slow your roll, right? And if I'm feeling like, like, oh, I don't know, then I think just get on with it. Like, are you kidding me? Knock it off,
like,
just get on with it.
Out creeping in, you're like, absolutely.
Yeah.
No time for that. I wrote down your quote that when you said sun champions, they breathe.
Yeah, that's okay. That is so that's a good one. Like that actually that's what that's what I say to my horses when I'm going cross country if they need that or whatnot. Right. And that's definitely Klaus's mantra.
I think that's t-shirt worthy. I know I feel like I need to talk to the ladies at Ride IQ and for each of these segments have one of the quotes on t-shirts or something like that for everybody's thing because some pretty good ones come out of that. I love that.
That's great.
Is there a piece of advice someone gave you along the way that you still reference today?
Definitely persevere, right? Don't give up. Right? That would be probably the biggest one. I don't even remember who would have. I mean, I'm sure I've been told that, so many times. The only way something, doesn't happen is if you give up, right? Yeah. So that is for sure the best piece of advice I have ever been given, right? Which is
finding Nemo, right? Just keep swimming.
Yeah, exactly, right? Just keep doing it. The only way it doesn't happen is if you stop doing. So just
keep on swimming.
Yeah.
What do you do when you are seeking inspiration?
I kind of feel like we've gone like I think you can find inspiration in so many places. So again, I think learning anything new is inspiring. So anything, I find inspiration everywhere, right? I find like I'm inspired by you right now. Right. Like I am, right? Like I think it's so cool, right? Like I think that, to hear how you think about things and I'm like, oh, like that's so cool, right? I think that's inspiring, right? And I think that I find that everywhere, right? Like I'm inspired when like a baby horse does puts a foot right, like does a transition well, like that's inspiring because you want more of it, right? It's inspiring when your more experienced horses get a little better at something, come up in their backs a little bit more, take a deeper breath themselves, right? They get a little stronger. Like all of these things are so inspiring. So inspiration I think is all around us every day.
That the very simple there's a really good podcast with Linda Pirelli and her answer was like exactly the same. She's like, I wake up and I just look around. She's surrounded by people, by horses, and she's like, it's everywhere. You just gotta be looking.
it is everywhere, and it'd be open to anything, right? Like it can, it's, everybody's got, everybody's got something to teach you,
Mhm.
right? Everybody, right? So it's, like all of the, all my kids that are around me, I always think, I'm inspired by them every day. You're never too young to teach, right? You're never too old to learn, right? So it's, you can, if you just look around and, any moment in time, you're learning something from
Mhm.
someone or something or some creature or, something like, oh, right. Like
Mhm.
that's that,
Totally.
look at that, right? Like that's, so I, it's, I find that pretty easy.
Pretty easy. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably, that's that I was, I just had a weird day the other day and I just, like felt like just didn't feel great. I wasn't able to, I kind of got bogged down with some stuff in the morning and I just felt like not awesome. And I was trying to think, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? Because I was seeking that kind of inspiration. And it took me like a lot of hours to find it. I made a few wrong turns looking for it. I'll tell you that. But it ended up actually just working out for like doing something harder so that I felt like rest felt inspiring. And
Yeah.
but I am just thinking of like an inspiration challenge where maybe trying to do something where instead of in the moment when you need inspiration, figuring out little, like that real thing that you need, but when you are feeling good, to kind of look around and see, okay, that little thing inspires me, that little thing inspires me, or that's interesting, to kind of have a list of stuff when you start feeling that kind of coming on, that you can reference this or that or whatever, like it. Because I like a couple of days ago, I'm normally like you or like Linda. I like to read. I love to teach. I love to write. I find inspiration in a lot of places. But sometimes you just have a day, or
Of course,
especially if you
everybody
have,
does.
yeah, if you're feeling sick or you have an injury or you're if there's something that's limiting you from being able to do what you want to do. I'm just wondering if there's. I'm going to do a little inspiration challenge. Maybe we can do something on the Ride
I
IQ
like
app
that.
that when
I
you're
like
feeling
it.
good, you find some things that, kind of spark you when you're already a little bit
Yeah.
up. And that way you can kind of reference those.
Remember it. I do
Yeah.
think it's important, like everybody has times when they, like, I have lots of times when I feel um uh not good, right? It's, like of
Heavy.
course everybody does, right? Like
Yeah.
I just was out in Utah teaching a clinic, and I had my plane ride out there, and this is very embarrassing. I probably should not share, but I will share. Um, this is so, and I was just sad. I was just sad, and I was watching. I had downloaded This Is Us, the
Oh
TV show. This Is
God.
Us.
I just
So I
stopped
have
watching
never.
that.
Okay, so right, so I have never, like, I just got into this, and I love it, right? And
Yeah.
so I'm on the plane though, and I'm like, I'm just kind of tired and whatnot. So then I start watching this, and I literally spend like I am bawling on the
Crying the
plane.
whole time. You're like trying to hide your thing.
I'm like, oh my God, I can't stop, right? And then I was like, you have to stop watching this because you have to stop crying, right?
Yeah.
And then I stopped watching, but I couldn't stop crying.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no.
And I was like, oh my God, these poor people next to me on the plane, they're going to think I have COVID because I had a mask on, but I had to keep blowing my nose.
No.
And I was like, get your life together, Sharon. Like, what is happening? And then I was like, actually, you know what? It's okay. Right?
Okay.
Like, it's
Yeah.
okay. You're allowed to be sad sometimes.
Yeah.
Just be sad. Like, it's totally okay. Might as well, crying on a plane as well. Just like, whatever. And crying by yourself in your room, right? You're never going to see any of these people ever again, so it's totally all right. But of course,
Yeah.
like I have these, of course we have these moments, and I'm like, well, that's actually, so it's, the emotion is actually kind of nice. It's better than never having the emotion, right? Like sometimes you're just sad, and that's okay, right? And sometimes you're not inspired, and that's okay, right? Like there's, then
Yeah.
like it's no matter what's going on, you're gonna be okay. Like it's all gonna be just. And I
Yeah.
do find I take inspiration when I feel like that, and knowing that at any given point in time, you are where you're meant to be. Right? Like at any given point in time, whatever you're feeling, it's what you were meant to, it's what was meant to be at that point in time. So, don't fight it, like don't, like it's all good, right? Like if, there's something in that moment to be gained, whatever that moment is. And that definitely helps me, lets me be able to cry on a cross country trip. It's all gonna be okay.
I've definitely been that person, but there are $1 million executives and producers that make you cry in that show. Like I had to stop watching it because I was like, every day I was coming home and I was just like bawling, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like,
I'm glad it was so funny.
I know. I just switched myself, and now I'm like a Ted Lasso kind of girl now.
There you go.
Like I got to keep it up. But no, I think on the emotional scale, it's like, I think Warwick Schiller says it the best, is that to have the highs, you have to have the lows, and anything that you listen to on obviously like anybody that's on medication for depression or PTSD or any trauma related anything, it for sure is so helpful in so many places, especially if you're needing sleep or things like that. But it also it blocks the same things that let you feel the highs. And so like like that's what I try and do. If I'm having those days that I feel a little bit low or whatever, I'm like, that's okay, because I have this depth here a little bit. I can also experience the height there a little bit. And it's just to make sure that I don't get stuck in either one for too long.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
This flight will be landing in 3 hours and I will be okay.
Exactly.
I will be okay. Have you had an experience or adversity separate from horses in your life that you feel has directly influenced you as a horseman or horsewoman?
Yes, definitely. The death of my mom and living through 12 years with her where we weren't sure if today was the day, right? So that it gives you a lot of perspective about what's important and a lot of patience, right? So that's, definitely one of those experiences that helped me grow, for sure. It helps me be better with my horses, right? So that's that meant a lot.
I'm sure the attention to presence and awareness and space and time and how it's all important, but it doesn't matter at all at the same time. It's like the constant paradox of life.
So for sure.
I think that's just actually so amazing, the 12 years that you had together, and that in itself might have been such it must have been, right? Like such a strengthening of your relationship and your time together, because it just made you pack your life into that amount of space and time with her.
It was a gift. It was an absolute gift. I can't, I'm so grateful, right? That, so awful, for her to have that, and so grateful to have all of that time. Like most people, they don't have that, right? When someone dies, they die. And most of the time it's unexpected, right? And that's awful. So that, I think it was a gift, that happened the way it did, and so many life lessons with that.
Well, Sharon, this has been amazing. It's been such a wonderful conversation. I'm inspired.
I'm inspired too. Sinead, you are so good at this. Oh my God, you're so right. You're brilliant. I love it.
Well, it has been something that has been surprisingly, I don't know why I'm surprised. I have like really cool friends, but it's been so fun to have this space and time with you and with a lot of our guests, because again, it makes you realize that we're all, doing the same thing, maybe slightly different ways, but have the same dreams and goals and highs and lows and all of that stuff in between. And the more like you're doing, which is so amazing, the more you can share it, which I felt a conscious effort from you, just even in, I don't know what, in things I've read or notes that have been out and about, or your students getting interviewed at press conferences. And there's just been this hint of focus on your energy and your mental awareness and that thing. And I think it's so, so cool. And I think you just keep on doing it. Keep on sharing that. It's going to make a lot of people, but more importantly, a lot of horses have a lot more pleasant experience with the people like us that they have to put up with all the time. There are bad dance partners.
No, anyone can learn to be a good dance partner.
Just follow. Relax.
Relax. Just relax. Breathe.
Fun champions. They breathe too. Well, you have a wonderful rest of your day, and with your evening plan, have a glass of wine, have a glass of champagne. Your work is done, and I'm excited to share this with the rest of our community.
Thank you so much, and thank you for doing it. It's a beautiful thing, right? And then, to get the information out there, right? So thank you for doing it.
My pleasure. All right, Sharon, we'll see you soon.
Sounds great. All right, bye-bye.
I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. Before you go, I just want to let you know more about Ride IQ. At its core, Ride IQ gives everyone access to instruction from the best equestrian coaches in the world. It might sound impossible, but with Ride IQ, you get access to the private mobile app that has hundreds of on-demand, listen while you ride audio lessons taught by top riders and coaches in eventing, hunter jumpers, and dressage. Here's how it works. You look through the app and choose a lesson based on your horse or a skill you're working on. There are lessons for green off-the-track thoroughbreds and nervous horses and horses that are behind the leg, as well as lessons that teach every stage of skills like shoulder in or trot lengthenings. Then you tack up and press play, and you have a top coach like Doug Payne or Leslie Law or Gina Smith in your ear guiding you every step of the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, it is always appreciated if you can take a moment to share the podcast with your friends and family and leave a review on your podcast app. The best way to support the podcast is to become a Ride IQ member at ride-iq.com. And when you do, we hope you're excited to see that In Stride is just one of multiple podcast shows on the app, including hack chats, conversations with coaches, and more. And lastly, I wanted to let you know that our friends over at Major League Eventing also have a podcast. And if you enjoyed this show, I think you would also really enjoy their show. Just search for the Major League Eventing podcast in your podcast app and give it a listen.